A lavish gourmet dinner was meant to delight the senses, but tonight an uninvited and gruesome guest would turn the table into a scene of chilling mystery. Welcome to the Silent Clue Works. I am your host, Echo of Silence. Comment where you're listening from. Your presence makes these stories come alive. Let's enter the mystery. I rode with Vale downtown in a car that smelled of lemon peel and ambition. He talked constantly, perhaps to keep me from asking questions, perhaps because silence frightened him. The restaurant was on West 54th, a narrow front with brass letters and a window that displayed nothing but confidence. Inside, the kitchen hummed like a temple, stainless steel gleaming, knives aligned as if awaiting inspection. Vale introduced me as his assistant, which I let pass. I watched. The staff watched him back. Fear has a posture, and they wore it in their shoulders. Vale showed me the note. It was typed, short and cruelly specific, and it mentioned a source reduced too far, a substitution made under pressure, and a critic bribed to forget. It promised exposure tonight, publicly, theatrically, unless the writer was seated at the chef's table. The name signed was Martin Hale. I recognized it, so did Vale when I said it aloud. Hale was a food writer who had fallen from grace, or been pushed. Lawsuits, retractions, a stint abroad that never got explained. He had resurfaced recently, leaner, louder, and angrier. Vale said Hale had been his mentor once, before becoming his parasite. I walked to the dining room, noted the tables, the angles, the sight lines. A man who planned humiliation would want witnesses. He would want control. That meant timing. I asked Vale who the other guests were. He gave me names that meant money, influence, and appetite. No one innocent, no one irrelevant. Back at the brownstone, I reported to Wolfe. He listened with his eyes closed, fingers tented, absorbing the cadence more than the content. When I finished, he opened one eye. "Blackmail," he said. "Yes, but inelegant. There is an additional objective." "Besides eating well?" I asked. "Reinstatement," Wolfe said. "Hale seeks not merely revenge, but restoration. He intends to force a public acknowledgement of his influence. How do we stop him from taking a seat?" "We do not," Wolfe said. "We make him choke on it." That evening I returned to the restaurant alone. Hale arrived early, which told me he was nervous. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes and shook hands as if collecting debts. I sat at the bar, drank seltzer, and listened. Hale talked about truth like a man selling insurance. In the kitchen, something was off. A jar of saffron was missing. Fritz would have noticed. So did I. I asked a sous chef, who swore it had been there an hour before. Sabotage doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be precise. I called Wolfe from the alley. He asked only one question. "Is who benefits?" "Hale," I said. "Then observe," Wolfe replied. "Do nothing." Dinner began. Courses flowed. Compliments were traded like currency. Hale waited. When the main course was served, he stood. He spoke about integrity, about debts unpaid, about the rot beneath elegance. Vale paled. The guests leaned in. Before Hale could name names, Wolfe's voice came from the doorway, calm and immovable. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you are mistaken about your leverage." The room froze. Wolfe did not enter. He did not need to. He explained briefly how the saffron's absence would be discovered, how Hale's planted accusation would collapse when the inventory was checked, how the old compromise would be revealed as Hale's coercion, documented in letters he had foolishly kept. He concluded with a suggestion that Hale depart quietly, or loudly, escorted. Hale's smile broke. He sat. He left. The guests exhaled. Later, back home, Wolfe ate his dinner in peace. "Extortionists," he said, "don't always overestimate appetite." I wrote it down. The next morning the brownstone was restored, but not unchanged. Fritz replaced the saffron in its place with ceremony, and Wolfe accepted his breakfast with approval that was almost warmth. I filed my report, added marginal notes, and waited for the phone to ring. It did. Vale called to say Hale had vanished again, leaving behind apologies that tasted of vinegar. No charges were filed. None were needed. Wolfe considered this, and then dictated a letter to Hale's former publisher, outlining facts without adjectives. It would arrive like a chill. He had chosen moral justice over legal spectacle, and the balance pleased him. I asked if he had ever doubted the outcome. Never, he said. Men who trade in leverage forget weight. By noon the city pressed in, but the brownstone held. I went out for groceries, legs earning their keep, and returned to find Wolfe asleep, orchids thriving, and silence intact. Trouble had passed, for now. It always does, until the bell rings again. I updated the casebook, noting the absence of blood, yet the presence of appetite, which seemed to amuse Wolfe when he skimmed it later. He corrected a verb, underlined a motive, and closed the folder. The city would remember the dinner as excellent, the scandal as avoided, and the lesson as invisible. That suited Wolfe. It suited me too, though my feet disagreed. By evening the phone stayed quiet. The doorbell behaved. Nan and Fritz announced dinner. Wolfe smiled faintly, a rare concession, and said nothing at all. I poured milk, closed the book, and looked around the office, counting the familiar objects like anchors. The desk was steady, the chair immovable, the world temporarily reasonable. Somewhere a man planned a scheme and another believed in leverage. Wolfe would be ready. So would I. Shoes polished, notebook empty. Patience thin but serviceable. That is the arrangement, and it works. For now. And the silence held, thick and earned, and I enjoyed it the way you enjoy a good meal after a long day, knowing hunger will return. It always does. Until then, the brownstone stood, a fortress of habits and reason, and Nero Wolfe reigned from his chair, undefeated. I checked my watch, finished my milk, and waited, because waiting is part of the job, and because trouble respects patience almost as much as timing, more often than it should in experience. Silence in our house is never idle. It has posture and purpose, like Wolfe in his chair. I was halfway through reorganizing the desk drawers, an activity Wolfe tolerates because it looks like work, when the phone rang with the kind of insistence that suggests it knows it will be answered. I picked up. Goodwin. The voice on the other end was controlled, male, and careful about it. Mr. Goodwin, this is Saul Panzer. Mr. Wolfe asked me to call if I heard anything interesting. That got my attention. And Saul doesn't call unless the fish has already taken the bait and is swimming in circles. I'm listening. Martin Hale booked a room at a hotel on Lexington last night, Saul said. Checked in under his own name, checked out an hour later in a hurry. He left behind a briefcase. What was in it? I asked. Copies, Saul said. Letters, contracts, notes. Enough paper to ruin several careers if assembled correctly. None of it original. Meaning? Meaning the originals are somewhere else. Ours and Hale didn't trust the hotel's safe. I thanked Saul and hung up. Wolfe had not moved. His eyes were open now, following the thread as it unspooled. Hale is still in play, I said. Of course, Wolfe replied. He is not a man who retreats. He merely relocates. Saul thinks the originals are still out there. Then Hale has an accomplice, Wolfe said. Or a custodian. Either is a vulnerability. I went out again, because that is how things get done. Hale had been loud, theatrical. That kind of man always leaves a wake. I talked to a bartender who remembered him complaining about critics. a cab driver who remembered an argument about fare, a clerk who remembered Hale asking about storage facilities. That last one was useful. By mid-afternoon, I had an address in Queens, a squat building with roll-up doors and a manager who accepted cash and forgot faces. I rented a unit across the hall and waited. Waiting is easier when you know what you're waiting for. His Hale arrived just before dusk, carrying a canvas bag that looked heavier than paper should. He unlocked his unit, went inside, and stayed there too long. I heard voices. One was his. The other was unfamiliar, but calm, persuasive, practiced. When they emerged, Hale looked smaller. The other man did not look at me. He locked the unit, handed Hale a receipt, and left without hurry. I followed Hale instead. He went back into Manhattan and into a bar that pretended to be anonymous. He drank alone, and I sat 2 stools down and listened to him rehearse a speech under his breath. It was about betrayal, about stolen credit, about the necessity of force. He paid, stood, and nearly fell. That told me enough. I called Wolfe from the sidewalk. "He's not done," I said. "But he's not the brains." "No," Wolfe agreed. "The brains are tidy." The next move came to us. The doorbell rang at 9, which is a felony, and Fritz glared at me as if I had invited it. And I opened the door and found Lorenzo Vale again, without his polish. His scarf was gone. His hands shook. "He's back," Vale said. "Hale sent a message. He wants a meeting. Here." Wolfe's voice carried from the office. "Mr. Vale will be admitted." Vale sat. He talked. Hale had offered a truce of sorts. He would stay silent, return to obscurity, in exchange for a sum and a favor. The favor involved another chef, another compromise, another secret waiting to be harvested. Wolfe listened, son expressionless. When Vale finished, Wolfe said, "You will agree." Vale stared. "What?" "You will agree," Wolfe repeated. "You will schedule the meeting here, tomorrow evening." "And you?" Vale asked. "I will attend," Wolfe said, "from this chair." Vale left looking like a man who had just agreed to surgery without anesthesia. The next day was preparation. Wolfe dictated. I ran errands. Saul Panzer arrived with a file and a smile that meant he liked where this was going. We laid out the facts, and the timelines, the connections. Hale was a lever. The other man was the fulcrum. He arrived with Hale at 7. He introduced himself as Arthur Klein, a consultant. He wore a suit that believed in discretion. His eyes catalogued the room, then dismissed it. That was a mistake. Wolfe did not offer him a chair. Hale fidgeted. Vale sweated. Klein spoke first. "This need not be adversarial," Klein said. "On the contrary," Wolfe replied, "it must be." Wolfe spoke of storage units, not of copies and originals, of the convenience of keeping leverage in multiple locations. He spoke of a pattern of men who positioned themselves as brokers of shame. He spoke of Arthur Klein's quiet career, arranging compromises and collecting percentages. Klein listened, politely, until Wolfe mentioned a document Klein believed lost. The room shifted. Hale looked at Klein, confused. Vale looked relieved. "You see," Wolfe said, "Mr. Hale was never your principal. He was your instrument, a dull one." Klein smiled thinly. "You have no proof?" Wolfe nodded. "Mr. Goodwin?" I handed Saul the file. Saul handed Klein a copy of a ledger, names redacted, numbers intact. Klein's smile vanished. Wolfe concluded with options. Klein could leave, abandon Hale, and accept exposure at Wolfe's discretion, or he could escalate and guarantee it. Klein chose retreat. He always had. Hale exploded. He accused, begged, threatened. Wolfe waited until the noise spent itself. "Mr. Hale," Wolfe said, "No, you are dismissed." Hale left shouting. The door closed. The brownstone exhaled. Vale thanked Wolfe until it became embarrassing. Wolfe waved him away. When we were alone, Wolfe leaned back. "Extortion," he said, "is an ecosystem. Remove the predator, the scavenger starves." "And Hale?" I asked. "He will find another table," Wolfe said, "or starve." I wrote it down. Outside, the city kept eating itself. Inside, dinner was announced. Wolfe rose, a rare concession to victory, and went to the dining room. I followed, notebook full, feet tired, appetite intact. The bell did not ring again that night. I did not expect it to, but I polished my shoes anyway. The aftermath settled in layers. Vale's problem had been excised with Wolfe's usual economy, but the residue lingered the way smoke does after a fire you didn't start. I knew it because Wolfe knew it, and Wolfe knew it because he was already thinking about lunch instead of orchids. The next morning, while Fritz prepared breakfast with the seriousness of a state function, Wolfe summoned me to the office earlier than protocol allowed. He was seated, hands folded, eyes alert. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "Arthur Klein will not accept defeat." "Because men like him never do," I said. "They just renegotiate the terms." "Precisely. He will attempt to restore equilibrium. That requires leverage." "Which he's short on," I said. "For the moment," Wolfe corrected. "And he will seek new material." That meant new victims, or old ones who hadn't yet learned. I finished my eggs and went out, because the city doesn't wait for theory to catch up with practice. Saul Panzer called me before noon. "Klein's been busy," he said, quietly. He met with a lawyer who specializes in reputational containment. He also made a call to a woman named Eleanor Pike. The name snagged. The publicist? The same. She cleans messes for people who can't afford soap. "Then Klein's trying to build a counterweight," I said. "Or a shield," Saul replied. "Either way, he's spending money." That told me Klein felt exposed. Exposed men either hide or strike. I decided to see which. I found Pike in her office near Union Square, glass walls and expensive silence. She smiled like a person trained to smile without committing to it. "I can't discuss clients," she said. "I'm not asking," I told her. "I'm offering context." She listened, because context is currency. I laid out Klein's pattern, Hale's implosion, Wolfe's involvement. I didn't accuse. I suggested inevitability. Pike's smile thinned. "Hypothetically," she said, "if someone were being manipulated, they might seek to disengage." "Hypothetically," I said, "they might also leave a trail." She looked at me for a long second, then glanced at her phone. "You should speak to Martin Hale again." "I tried," I said. "He's avoiding mirrors." "He's staying at a friend's place in Brooklyn," she said. "For now." That was enough. Hale was a loose end, and loose ends get yanked. I found Hale in a walk-up that smelled like old paint and regret. He answered the door with suspicion and a half-packed bag behind him. "I'm done," he said before I spoke. "It's over." "Nothing's over until it's quiet," I told him. "And you're loud." He laughed, then stopped. "Klein cut me loose." "He always would," I said. You were useful until you weren't." "He wants his papers back," Hale said. "The originals. He says they're mine by right, but dangerous." "Where are they?" I asked. Hale hesitated. "I don't have them." That was a lie, but not a confident one. "You don't have them with you," I said. "Who does?" Hale sagged. "A woman, a former editor. She kept them for me years ago. Insurance." "Name?" I asked. "Judith Rann," he said. "She lives in Connecticut. She hates me." "Everyone hates someone," I said. "Some people monetize it." I left him with advice he wouldn't take and called Wolfe. He listened, then asked one question. "Is Ms. Rann alive?" "As of last night," I said. "That may change," Wolfe said. "Go." Judith Rann lived in a house that had given up on impressing anyone. She answered the door with a look that suggested she'd been expecting trouble and was disappointed it was only me. "I don't give interviews," she said. "I don't conduct them," I said. I prevent funerals." That got me inside. Over coffee that tasted like principle, she admitted she still had the documents, originals, letters, proof of Klein's brokerage and Hale's complicity. "Klein called," she said. "He offered money." "And?" I asked. "I offered silence," she said. "He didn't like that." Neither did I. "He won't stop," I said. "He can't." She nodded. "That's why I called the police." That surprised me. "And?" "They're considering it," she said. Slowly. Slow doesn't beat urgent. I asked where the documents were. She showed me a safe bolted to the floor. Solid. Old. Trustworthy. "May I?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." I respected that. Respect buys cooperation later. I drove back as dusk settled and called Wolfe. He was unsurprised. "Klein will act tonight," Wolfe said. "He must." "Then we're ahead of him," I said. "Barely," Wolfe replied. "Return home." I did. The brownstone felt tighter, as if it knew it was about to be tested. Wolfe sat, immovable. Fritz hovered. The phone rang. It was Saul. "Klein's on the move," he said. "Headed north. Fast." "Toward Rann?" I asked. "Yes." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "you will intercept." "Alone?" I asked. "Not entirely," Wolfe said. "The law will arrive eventually. You need only delay." I grabbed my coat. Delay is not my favorite verb, but it's in the job description. I drove north with the city thinning behind me, lights stretching, time compressing, and I reached Rann's street just as a black sedan pulled up ahead of me. Klein stepped out, composed as ever. He walked to the door. I walked faster. "Mr. Klein," I said. "Late for a social call." He turned, annoyed. "This is not your concern." "Everything is my concern tonight," I said. He smiled, thinly. "Move." I didn't. Words happened. Neighbors noticed. A light flicked on. Sirens, distant but approaching, grew louder. Klein weighed options and chose the least damaging. Well, he returned to his car and left, tires angry. I went inside. Rann was pale but steady. We waited. The police arrived. Statements were made. Papers were secured. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was past midnight. Wolfe was awake. "Done?" he asked. "For now," I said. He nodded. "Then we wait." I sat, tired but alert. Waiting again. It never ends, but sometimes it pauses. Outside, the city breathed. Inside, reason held its ground. Waiting lasted until dawn thinned the windows, and Fritz began moving with the careful optimism of a man who believed breakfast could fix anything. Wolfe had not slept. He rarely does when a pattern is unfinished. He sat in his chair, hands folded, eyes half-lidded, listening to the city come back online. At 7:15, the phone rang. Wolfe nodded to me, permission and instruction in one motion. "Goodwin," I said. "It's Rann," the voice said. Tired, controlled. "They took the documents, all of them." "That's good," I said. "Chain of custody beats chain of favors." "Not all," she corrected. "One set stayed with me. Copies. I kept them for a reason." "Because you don't trust systems," I said. "Because I trust leverage," she said, and hung up. I told Wolfe. He absorbed it, then frowned slightly, which for him is a grimace. "Klein will attempt retrieval," he said. "Again. Or he will attempt discredit." "Of her?" I asked. of the documents, Wolfe said. Truth is malleable when presented improperly. That meant narrative. Publicists, friendly journalists, Pike. Klein would not move directly now. He would move sideways. I suggested we move first. By 9, I was at Pike's office again. She looked irritated to see me, which meant she was relieved I had come. He's panicking, she said without preamble. He wants a statement drafted. Preemptive. Denial wrapped in concern. Classic, I said. Who's signing it? No one, she said. It's unattributed. That won't work, I said. People smell fear in unsigned paper. She sighed. What do you want, Archie? I smiled at the use of my first name. It meant the gloves were off. I want you to do nothing, I said. She laughed. That's not my job. It is today, I said, because if you move, you leave footprints, and Wolfe will follow them. That got her attention. You're bluffing. I never bluff, I said. I just wait. She stared at me, then nodded once. And he's not listening to me anyway. That tracked. Klein was the sort who hired professionals and ignored them. I left her to her silence and went back to the brownstone. Saul Panzer arrived before lunch with updates. Klein had made calls to 2 former clients, fishing for counter-accusations. One had refused. The other had asked for money up front. Extortion among extortionists, I said. Exactly, Saul said. It's messy. Wolfe listened, then said, Mr. Klein's weakness is not his greed. How it is his pride. How do we use it? I asked. We invite him, Wolfe said. Here, I said. Yes, Wolfe said. He believes this house a stage. We will make it a mirror. The invitation went out via a lawyer Klein trusted, phrased as an opportunity to resolve matters discreetly. Discretion is catnip to men like Klein. He accepted within the hour. He arrived at 4, alone, impeccably composed. He glanced around the office as if assessing acoustics. Mr. Wolfe, he said, you enjoy theater. I enjoy clarity, Wolfe replied. Sit. Klein did. He spoke of misunderstandings, of overzealous associates, of unfortunate coincidences. Wolfe let him talk until the words tangled themselves. Then Wolfe spoke of Judith Wren, of copies, of Pike's reluctance, of Saul's file, of the police's growing interest. You have miscalculated, Wolfe said. Your operation depended on secrecy and speed. You now possess neither. Klein leaned back, as you have no direct evidence tying me to a crime. Yet, Wolfe said, but you have created a narrative vacuum. It will be filled. Klein smiled. By whom? By you, Wolfe said, unless you choose otherwise. The choice Wolfe offered was elegant. Klein would provide a sworn statement outlining his brokerage activities, naming clients only where documentation existed, framing himself as a consultant who had overstepped. He would resign from his firm, or liquidate assets sufficient to fund restitution, and depart quietly. In exchange, Wolfe would ensure the narrative emphasized contrition over malice. Klein laughed. Then he stopped. He looked at me, then at Saul, then back at Wolfe. You think you can control this? He asked. No, Wolfe said. I think I can conclude it. Klein stood. I will consider your proposal. You will accept it, Wolfe said. If you do not, you will be arrested within 48 hours. On what charge? Klein asked. Pick one, Wolfe said. They are abundant. Klein left without shaking hands. That evening passed without incident. The night after did not. At 2 a.m, the doorbell rang. I answered to find a uniform and a detective with the posture of a man who doesn't like being awake. Arthur Klein is dead, the detective said. That changed the temperature of the room. Wolfe received them in the office, robe immaculate, expression unreadable. The detective explained, and Klein had been found in his apartment. Apparent suicide. Note left. Confession implied. Wolfe listened, then asked to see the note. He read it slowly. "This is forgery," Wolfe said. The detective bristled. "We have handwriting." "Which can be simulated," Wolfe said, "and motive, which can be manufactured." I leaned in. The note was too neat, too comprehensive. Men who kill themselves do not tidy their narratives. "Who benefits?" Wolfe asked. The detective frowned. "Everyone?" "No," Wolfe said. Only those who prefer a corpse to a witness." The detective left unconvinced but uneasy. Afterward, Wolfe sat in silence. "Klein would not choose this," I said. "No," Wolfe agreed. "He would choose delay." "Then someone chose for him," I said. "Precisely," Wolfe said. "And that someone remains." The game had shifted. The predator was gone, but the ecosystem still moved. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "we have a murderer." I nodded. Shoes on. Notebook open. Silence broken again. A death has a way of simplifying motives while complicating facts. By the time the detective's footsteps faded down the front steps, the brown stone felt different, or as if the walls themselves were recalculating risk. Wolfe remained motionless, but his stillness had sharpened. "Klein's death is inconvenient," he said at last. "For him," I said. "For us," Wolfe corrected. "A living man errs. A dead one is edited." I poured myself coffee. "Suicide that's too neat usually means someone wanted the book closed." "Yes," Wolfe said, and closed quickly. The question was who had gained from Klein's silence. Hale was the obvious answer, but Hale was also the least competent. Pike had motive to contain fallout, but murder was a blunt instrument for a woman who preferred erasers. Clients? Possibly, but clients rarely kill the broker unless the broker threatens to talk. "Judith ran," Wolfe said suddenly. I looked at him. "You think she—" "No," Wolfe said. "But she possesses leverage, integrity, and copies. That makes her a fulcrum. The murderer will orbit her next." That meant we didn't wait. I called Ran. She answered on the second ring, which meant she hadn't slept. "I heard," she said before I spoke. "Good," I said. "Then you know why I'm calling." "I didn't kill him," she said. "I know," I said. "But someone will want you to think they did." There was a pause. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said, which means everything. "Don't talk, don't move, and don't be alone." "I don't scare easily," she said. "Tonight you should," I said. I drove up to Connecticut with Saul riding shotgun, which he pretended not to enjoy. We arrived before midnight. Ran let us in. Coffee already made, documents untouched. Saul set up camp by the window. I checked locks. Ran watched us with the patience of a woman who had outlasted worse. "He was afraid," she said quietly. "Klein. Oh, he called me after he left Wolfe's house." "What did he say?" I asked. "That he'd misjudged," she said. "That someone else was pressuring him. A client who didn't want restitution or resignation. They wanted erasure." That tightened the circle. A client with enough fear to kill, enough resources to stage a suicide, and enough foresight to act before Klein could talk. "Names?" I asked. She shook her head. "He didn't give one. He said he'd handle it." "And that was his mistake," I said. But nothing happened that night, which meant something would soon. By morning, the police had ruled the death a suicide pending further review, which meant the window for manipulation was open. Wolfe called at 9. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "return. Bring Miss Ran." "That'll be easy," I said. "She's stubborn." "So am I," Wolfe replied. Ran agreed after a moment's thought. "If someone is hunting me," she said, I'd rather be in a house that expects it. The brownstone accepted her without comment. The Fritz served lunch with professional indifference. Wolfe received Ran with courtesy that bordered on respect. "You kept copies," Wolfe said. "Yes," Ran said. "You will show them to me," Wolfe said. "All of them?" She did. Wolfe read with care, asking occasional questions, noting patterns. By mid-afternoon he had what he wanted. "The murderer is not a client," Wolfe said finally. "It is a collaborator." "Pike?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said. "She traffics in narrative. It's not violence." "Then who?" Ran asked. Wolfe folded his hands. "A lawyer, one who specialized in reputational containment, one who advised Klein yesterday." That fit. Lawyers know process. They know how to delay and when to accelerate. They also know how to stage plausibility. Saul nodded. "Name's Gregory Sills," he said. "Clean record, quiet practice, loyal to his clients." "Too loyal," Wolfe said. "He advised Klein to accept my proposal. When Klein refused, and Sills acted to preserve his own exposure." "By killing his client," I said. "By silencing a liability," Wolfe said, "and framing it as despair." The next move was Wolfe's. He called Sills and invited him to the brownstone to discuss the implications of Klein's death on outstanding matters. Sills accepted. Lawyers never refuse information. Sills arrived composed, briefcase in hand, eyes alert. Wolfe spoke gently, outlining discrepancies in the suicide note, the timing, of the pressure Klein had described. Sills listened, nodding, until Wolfe mentioned a clause in a contract Sills had drafted years ago, one that tied Sills to a percentage of Klein's earnings in perpetuity. "That document," Wolfe said, "establishes motive." Sills stiffened. "You're speculating." "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "I am concluding." Sills denied, deflected, threatened. Wolfe waited, then produced a copy of a phone record, a late-night call to Ran's number, routed through Klein's phone, but originating elsewhere. "You attempted to retrieve the originals after Mr. Klein's death," Wolfe said. "You failed." Sills' face collapsed inward. He sat. He confessed enough to damn himself and stopped. The police arrived on Wolfe's schedule. Sills left in handcuffs, briefcase abandoned. When the house emptied, Wolfe leaned back. "Extortion," he said, "invites parasites." Ran thanked him. She left with her documents and a promise to testify. Hale vanished again, permanently this time, ceasing to irrelevance. That evening, the brownstone returned to order. Dinner was excellent. Wolfe ate with satisfaction. "Justice," he said, "is a matter of appetite and restraint." I wrote it down, closed the notebook, and listened to the quiet. The bell did not ring. For once, that felt like a victory. Order returned the way it always does, cautiously and with conditions. The police took their time removing the last traces of Gregory Sills from the house, and as if the brownstone might object to the intrusion and remember it later. Wolfe endured the questions with patience that bordered on boredom, correcting a fact here, declining a speculation there, until they left with notebooks full and confidence dented. When the door finally closed, the silence felt earned. Fritz appeared as if summoned by the absence of noise and began clearing cups that no one remembered drinking. Wolfe remained in his chair, eyes half closed, the case already receding into the category of things concluded. Ran had gone an hour earlier, documents secured, spine straighter than when she had arrived. She had thanked Wolfe without effusion, which he appreciated. Gratitude, like seasoning, is best applied sparingly. I sat at my desk and began the slow work of writing it all down while it was still sharp. Facts behave better when they're fresh. Wolfe watched me for a moment. Mr. Goodwin, he said, you will omit speculation. I always do, I said, after I indulge it. He made a sound that might have been approval or digestion. The phone rang just before 9. I answered out of habit. It was Pike. I wanted you to hear it from me, she said. I'm withdrawing from the situation. That's a relief, I said. For everyone. Klein's death frightened my clients, she said. Fear is bad for business. So is murder, I said. She exhaled. You were right, but silence was the only move. Usually is, I said, and hung up. I relayed it to Wolfe. He nodded once. Miss Pike is pragmatic. She will survive. And Hale? I asked. Hale, Wolfe said, will testify when compelled, embellish when allowed, and disappear when finished. He is no longer relevant. That left the moral accounting, which Wolfe prefers not to itemize aloud. He rose slowly and went to dinner. I followed because that is also part of the job. The meal was excellent. Fritz had been inspired by restraint and produced something simple and perfect. Wolfe ate with focus, then leaned back, satisfied. Mr. Goodwin, he said, what have you learned? That leverage is overrated, I said, and that people who trade in it eventually run out. Yes, Wolfe said. And? That silence isn't empty, I said. It's crowded with consequences. Wolfe smiled faintly. That was enough philosophy for one evening. She the next morning brought paperwork and a summons to provide additional statements. Saul Panzer handled what he could. I handled the rest. By noon, the story had settled into the shape it would keep. A disgraced consultant, a tragic suicide revised to homicide, a lawyer's overreach, justice proceeding as it does when guided firmly. There were no calls from Vale. His silence was deliberate and grateful. The restaurant would survive. The guests would remember a fine meal and forget the tension, which is how it should be. In the afternoon, Wolfe returned to his orchids. I took that as a sign that the world had been restored to tolerable balance. I went out for groceries, legs doing their duty, and came back with the city's noise on my coat. The brownstone absorbed it and quieted it. Wolfe was in his chair, Fritz in the kitchen, the desk steady beneath my hands. I filed the case under its proper name and closed the drawer. Another? I asked. In time, Wolfe said. They always come. I looked around the office, the familiar geometry of order and patience. Outside, the bell did not ring. Inside, reason held. I poured myself milk, raised the glass in a private toast to restraint, and drank. Somewhere, someone was planning a scheme and believing in leverage. Nero Wolfe would be ready. So would I. If the story had ended there, it would have been tidy, and tidiness makes me nervous. That I had just settled into the comfortable illusion that nothing more would happen when the doorbell rang at 11:30, which is not a misdemeanor, but a capital crime. Wolfe opened one eye and looked at me as if this was somehow my fault. I sighed, set down my glass, and went to answer. The man on the step wore a suit that had known better days and carried himself like someone who had lost the argument with sleep. He gave me a card. Detective Inspector Rowe, it read. Manhattan South. I thought you people were done with us, I said. So did I, he said. Then something else surfaced. I stepped aside and let him in. Wolfe did not move, which meant the detective would have to adapt. Rowe did. He sat, notebook ready, eyes alert. We reopened Klein's phone records, Rowe said. There's a call we can't place. It went out minutes before his death. Short. No voice match. But the number belongs to Lorenzo Vale. That landed with weight. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. That Mr. Vale? Wolfe said. Curious. He says Klein called him, Rowe said, to apologize. That is implausible, Wolfe said. Klein did not apologize. That's what I thought, Rose said. So I paid Vale a visit. He was cooperative. Too cooperative. Fear masquerading as civility, Wolfe said. Did he offer an explanation? He said Klein was desperate, Rowe replied. That Klein feared exposure and wanted forgiveness. From a man he intended to exploit, Wolfe said. No. Rowe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin. Vale doesn't forgive, I said. He invoices. Rowe nodded. That's why I'm here. I don't think Vale killed Klein, but I think he knew it was coming. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Foreknowledge is not culpability, he said. Sometimes it is, Rowe replied, if it informs behavior. Wolfe considered that. Mr. Goodwin, he said, you will see Mr. Vale. Again. I put on my coat. I was hoping you'd say that. Vale's restaurant was closed, but the lights were on in the kitchen. So he was alone, sleeves rolled, scrubbing a counter that was already clean. He smiled when he saw me, but it slipped quickly. You again, he said. Is something wrong? Depends on your definition, I said. Did Klein call you? Yes, he said. Briefly. What did he say? I asked. That he was sorry, Vale said. That he had made mistakes. And you believed him? I asked. Vale hesitated. I wanted to. Did he mention fear? I asked. Yes, Vale said. He said someone was forcing his hand. Did he name them? I asked. No, Vale said. He was cut off. I watched him. His hands were steady. His eyes were not. Why didn't you tell the police? I asked. Because, Vale said. I was relieved. That was honest, and honesty always complicates things. You thought his problem was ending, I said. Yes, Vale said. I thought I was safe. And when he died, I asked. I thought, Vale said quietly, was that I was very lucky. Luck has a way of demanding repayment. I thanked him and left. Back at the brownstone, I reported. Wolfe listened, then nodded. Mr. Vale is not a murderer, Wolfe said, but he is an accelerant. How so? I asked. He did nothing, Wolfe said, and in doing nothing he allowed others to act. That's thin, I said. Legally. Not ethically, Wolfe said, and ethics interest me more. Rowe returned the next day with confirmation. Vale had transferred a large sum 2 weeks earlier to an account associated with Gregory Sills, labeled consulting fees. The payment had continued even after Klein's death, routed to a shell. That looks bad, Rowe said. It looks like insurance, Wolfe said. Mr. Vale paid to be protected from exposure. When Klein threatened to disrupt that arrangement, Mr. Sills intervened. So Vale financed the silence, Rowe said. Yes, Wolfe said, without specifying the method. Rowe frowned. That's still not murder. No, Wolfe said, but it is conspiracy adjacent. Rowe left with that, which was all he could get. That evening, Vale called Wolfe. He asked for a meeting. Wolfe agreed, which told me everything. Vale sat in the familiar chair, pale but composed. He admitted the payments. He admitted the fear. He admitted he had hoped Klein would simply disappear. I didn't ask for this, Vale said. No, Wolfe said. You merely funded it. What happens now? Vale asked. That depends, Wolfe said, on your appetite for consequences. Vale swallowed. What do you want? Restitution, Wolfe said. Transparency and a public acknowledgement of your arrangements framed as contrition. That would ruin me, Vale said. No, Wolfe said. It will discipline you. Vale laughed weakly. You enjoy this? No, Wolfe said. I endure it. Vale agreed. He always would have. The next week brought statements, settlements, and a scandal that never quite caught fire, but smoked enough to leave a mark. Vale survived, thinner, quieter. When it was over, Wolfe returned to his chair, satisfied in the way of a man who prefers resolution to victory. "You didn't have to push him," I said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "I did." I wrote it down. Outside, the city adjusted as it always does. Inside, the brownstone held its shape. The bell did not ring again that night. I hoped it wouldn't the next. Hope is allowed, and even in this business. After Vale left, the brownstone felt scrubbed, the way a kitchen does after a spill that could have turned sour. Wolfe watched the door for a moment after it closed, as if expecting it to argue back, then dismissed it from his attention. Fritz appeared with coffee, setting the tray down with deliberate care. "That will be all," Wolfe told him. Fritz nodded and withdrew, approval in his posture. The house knew when a thing was finished. I sat at my desk, turning the last few days over in my head. Cases like this don't end with a bang. They end with a settling, like dust after furniture is moved. The danger had passed, but its outline remained. Rowe called the following afternoon. His voice carried a tired satisfaction. "Vale's statement lines up," he said. "Not criminally sufficient, but enough to close some doors for him. Sill's assets are frozen. Hale's agreed to testify, under supervision." "Supervision?" I said. "Constant," Rowe replied. "He's a liability with legs." "That makes him my kind of guy," I said. When I told Wolfe, he nodded once. "The matter will conclude itself," he said. "The machinery is engaged." "Then we're done?" I asked. Wolfe looked at me. "We are always done. Temporarily." That evening, as if to underline the point, a messenger delivered a package addressed to Wolfe. No return address. Inside was a single object, a menu from Vale's restaurant, dated the night of the disastrous dinner, signed on the back. "Thank you for your restraint. LV." Wolfe studied it, then handed it to me. "Frame it," he said, "as a reminder." "Of what?" I asked. "Of excess," Wolfe said, "and its correction." I did as instructed, placing it in the office where it would be seen but not admired. The brownstone resumed its rhythm. Orchids bloomed. Fritz experimented. Wolfe read. I ran errands and came back with the city on my shoes. A week passed without incident. That alone felt like a development. Then Hale called. I put him on speaker at Wolfe's request. Hale sounded smaller, cautious, like a man aware of his own margins. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For not letting me die a fool," Hale said. "Or worse." Wolfe spoke. "Mr. Hale, you are not redeemed. You are merely spared." "I know," Hale said. "I'm leaving the country. Quietly." "That would be wise," Wolfe said. Hale hesitated. "Do you think people can change?" Wolfe considered. "People can adjust," he said. "Change is rare." Hale accepted that and hung up. The line went dead, and with it, the last echo of the case. Later, alone in the office, I updated the file one final time. Names, dates, outcomes. I added a note in the margin, "Leverage decays." Wolfe glanced over my shoulder. "That is not an observation," he said. "It is a rule." I smiled. Outside, the city went on, appetites intact, schemes in progress. Inside, the brownstone held its quiet, a place where schemes came to be examined and occasionally, undone. Dinner was announced. Wolfe rose with his customary reluctance and went to the dining room. I followed, notebook closed, mind clear. The case had disturbed the house, tested its boundaries, and been resolved without bloodshed where possible, without mercy where necessary. As we ate, Wolfe spoke once more, almost to himself. "Civilization," he said, depends on limits. Those who ignore them invite correction. I raised my glass. To correction, I said. Wolfe inclined his head. The meal concluded. The night deepened. The bell did not ring. I washed my glass, set it aside, and looked around the familiar room, steady and composed. Tomorrow would bring its own disturbances. They always do. But for now, the brownstone was whole, and Nero Wolfe sat in judgment only of his dessert. That, in our line of work, counts as peace. Peace never announces itself, and it slips in while you're checking your watch or arguing with yourself about whether to open another drawer. The brownstone had settled into that kind of peace, provisional and alert, when the first real sign that the case was truly ending arrived in the least dramatic way possible. It was a letter. Not a threat, not a confession, not even a thank you. Just a letter, addressed to Nero Wolfe, postmarked Washington, formal enough to irritate him on sight. I opened it because that's my job, and read it twice before handing it over. It was from a federal agency that prefers its name unspoken. They thanked Wolfe for his informal cooperation, confirmed that certain materials had been received through appropriate channels, and assured him that ongoing proceedings would require no further involvement on his part. The tone was polite, distant, and final. Wolfe read it once, then again more slowly, as if testing for residue. When he was finished, he folded it with care and placed it on the corner of his desk. That, he said, is the sound of doors closing. Federal ones, I said. They don't slam, they hiss. Indeed, Wolfe replied, and they lock from the inside. That should have been the end of it. The ecosystem dismantled, the players dispersed, the machinery grinding on without us. But Wolfe does not fully disengage until the logic exhausts itself, and I have learned not to relax until he does. 2 days later, and he called me into the office at an hour that suggested intention rather than impulse. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "what is the remaining anomaly?" I thought about it. Hale was gone. Sills was in custody. Vale was chastened. Pike had withdrawn. Ran was protected. The authorities were satisfied. "The timing," I said finally. "Klein's death still feels rushed." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Specifically?" "He was killed before he could betray someone else," I said. "So, but Sills was already exposed." "Correct," Wolfe said. "Therefore, Sills did not act solely to protect himself." That clicked. He acted to protect someone higher up. Or, Wolfe said, someone adjacent. Someone whose exposure would have been catastrophic. "Another client," I said. "Possibly," Wolfe said, "but not one who required extortion. One who required insulation." That narrowed it. Not a diner, not a chef, not a publisher. Someone with reach. No, someone whose name never appeared on documents, only in margins. I said it out loud. "A regulator." Wolfe nodded. "Or an advisor to one." We did not need names. Wolfe rarely does. He needs confirmation. That came that afternoon when Saul Panzer arrived with a thin envelope and a look that meant he'd enjoyed himself too much. "Off the record," Saul said. Klein was negotiating immunity, not with prosecutors, with intermediaries. "Political?" I asked. "Bureaucratic," Saul said. "The kind that survives elections." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Then the murder was preemptive," he said. "Sills acted on instruction, explicit or implied." "And that instruction won't be traced," I said. "No," Wolfe agreed. "Nor should it be." I looked at him. "That's it?" "That is enough," Wolfe said. "Justice does not require omniscience, only balance." That was Wolfe's line, and I recognized the tone. The case was done not because every truth had been uncovered, but because uncovering more would unbalance things that did not belong to us. That night, I went out alone. No errands, no interviews, just a walk. The city was doing what it always does when it believes it has escaped notice. Eating, talking, scheming, forgetting. Somewhere, a man with influence slept easier because a consultant and a lawyer had taken the fall. Somewhere else, a woman with principles had chosen the least destructive truth. Somewhere else again, a chef cooked carefully, and when I returned, Wolfe was reading. Fritz was humming. The house was whole. The phone rang once more, late, and I answered out of reflex. It was Rowe. "We're closing it," he said, officially. "Congratulations," I said. "There's something you should know," he added. "The suicide ruling will stand." "I assumed it would," I said. "But," Rowe continued, "certain names will never appear in any report, ever." "That's how insulation works," I said. There was a pause. "You okay with that?" I thought of Wolfe, immovable, choosing where to stop. "I'm not required to like it," I said, "just to understand it." Rowe exhaled. "That's what I figured." When I told Wolfe, he nodded once, closed his book, and removed his glasses. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "the final duty of reason is restraint." "Even when restraint lets someone walk?" I asked. "Especially then," Wolfe said, "because pursuit without limit becomes appetite." That was his closing statement, and he meant it. And the next morning, the orchids bloomed as if on schedule. Fritz announced breakfast with satisfaction. I updated the casebook one last time, then slid it into its place. The framed menu hung quietly on the wall, not accusing, not celebratory, just present. The brownstone had been disturbed and restored. A man had died. Others had been corrected. The world had not improved, but it had been adjusted, which is sometimes the best you can do. I finished my milk, put on my jacket, and checked my shoes. The bell was quiet. I knew better than to trust it, but I appreciated the pause. In this line of work, pauses are earned. Morning arrived without ceremony, which suited the house and its occupant. Wolfe was already dressed when I came down, settled into his chair with a book open and no intention of reading it. That posture meant summation, not explanation, not rehearsal, but closure arranged to his satisfaction. "You are restless," he said without looking up. "So that's because everything's tidy," I said. "I don't trust tidy." "Nor do I," Wolfe replied. "But order achieved through restraint is durable." I waited. When Wolfe waits, he is thinking. When he speaks after waiting, he is finished. "The final shape of this matter," he said, "is not murder." I blinked. "I thought we covered that." "We covered homicide," Wolfe said. "Murder is intent with ownership. Gregory Sills executed the act, but intent was distributed." "You mean diluted?" I said. Precisely," Wolfe replied. The death of Arthur Klein was the inevitable conclusion of a system designed to profit from silence. Each participant contributed pressure. No single one applied the final force. "Which is why no single one will be punished appropriately," I said. Wolfe closed his book. "Punishment is not my concern. Termination is." I leaned back. "You terminated the system." "Yes," Wolfe said, "by rendering it unprofitable." That was the piece I hadn't fully articulated. Klein had brokered secrets. Sills had protected the machinery. Vale had funded it. Pike had softened its edges. Hale had advertised it, and above them all, unnamed, insulated, were those who paid to remain unnamed. "You didn't expose them," I said. "No," Wolfe agreed. "I made them cautious." He explained it then, not as a confession, but as an inventory. The documents secured by Rand would surface selectively, not explosively. Enough to establish pattern, not enough to invite retaliation. Vale's public contrition would poison the market for discreet compromise. Hale's testimony, supervised and constrained, would corroborate without embellishment. Sills's conviction would frighten the intermediaries, and the unnamed would retreat, not because they feared justice, but because the cost-benefit calculation had shifted. Extortion survives on predictability, Wolfe said. I introduced uncertainty. And Klein? I asked. Wolfe's eyes hardened slightly. Klein attempted to defect, and in doing so, he forced acceleration. His death was not ordered in a room. It was implied in a culture. That's a thin comfort, I said. It is sufficient, Wolfe replied. Thicker comfort is sentimental. The phone rang, right on time as if summoned by the conclusion. Wolfe nodded to me. I answered. It was Judith Rahn. Her voice was steady. It's over, she said. They accepted the filings. No grandstanding. Good, I said. There's one thing, she added. I want you to tell Wolfe that I'm done guarding other people's sins. I'll publish my own account, carefully. I smiled. He'll approve. I don't need approval, she said, but I'll accept alignment. When I told Wolfe, he nodded once. Ms. Rahn understands proportion. After that, there were no more calls, no bells, no envelopes. The day unfolded like any other. Fritz announced lunch. Wolfe ate. The orchids were admired. The city pressed its noise against the windows and failed to intrude. Once in the afternoon, Wolfe asked me to bring the framed menu down from the wall. I did. You may remove it, he said. Why? I asked. Because reminders lose utility when lessons are learned, Wolfe said. And clutter is an ethical failure. I returned the menu to the file, slid it into the case drawer, and closed it for the last time. The sound was final and satisfying. As evening settled, Wolfe spoke again, his voice almost reflective. Mr. Goodwin, civilization is not maintained by exposure. It is maintained by limits. Who sets them? I asked. Those with appetite, Wolfe said, and the discipline to restrain it. Dinner was excellent. Wolfe ate slowly, thoughtfully, then leaned back with a look that meant the day had earned its end. I poured milk, raised the glass, and did not toast. Some conclusions don't need punctuation. Later, alone in the office, I added the final line to the casebook. Not a flourish, not a moral. Just a note of fact. The machine failed because it was fed too well. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and listened. The brownstone was quiet, not expectant, not wary. Just quiet. That, in our line of work, is as close as you get to justice. Upstairs, Wolfe settled in for the night, orchids safe, conscience intact. Somewhere beyond the walls, people adjusted their calculations, trimmed their appetites, or ignored the warning entirely. That was out of our hands. The bell did not ring. And if it rang tomorrow, we would be ready.